wonderful old man moment for me. My computer has started to make very detailed announcements of everything that's happening within it. So we may or may not have some very detailed announcements pop up in the middle of this class. And if they do, I guess I'll just be, that'll be part of the thing. So we're gonna have a ball and a blanket towel handy. And yeah, let's start seated. That looks nice. So something that feels comfy for you. If you're thrilled with a place where you are, feel free to stay there. But I'll guide from seat. So just finding your way into a space where your spine can feel nice and supported. And really, when we're thinking about spinal support, we're thinking a lot about the hips. So you'll see me, I always place either a block or one of these meditation cushions underneath the seat so I can get a little more room for the hips here. And we just settle right in. We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here, just centering into the exchange of the breath. All that fluidity of the exchange is impacting your seat, your stability, your hips, your low, middle, and upper back. And then as you feel right, let's allow the eyes to softly blink open if they're closed as they come into that space. Let your palms roll up. So from wherever we are, just palms roll up. And let's take a nice moment to neutralize the chin so that cervical spine feels nice and supported and neutral. And then just turn your head over towards the right. And we'll inhale back to neutral. Palms stay up. And we'll turn over towards the left. And we'll return to neutral. And now we're going to take the left hand palm away from you. So back of the hand against the back. And we're going small to back here. Refine that neutrality of the cervical spine. And we'll turn over towards the right. And as you turn over towards the right, you get that nice little left shoulder pull back. Splay the fingers out wide. That helps open up this anterior restrictive quality. And we'll relax back to neutral. Return the left hand. Right hand comes the small back again. Palm away from you, back of the hand up against the small. And then we turn over towards the left. Splay those fingers out nice and wide as you pull that right shoulder back and into a little more engagement, anterior openness. And when we feel right, we'll return back to neutral. Take an exhale and feel the tops of the shoulders soften down away from the ears. And then try to keep the stability here across the top of the shoulder girdle as you take that left arm straight up and overhead. So you have some level of like settled in the shoulders. And the right palm can roll down for a little bit more stability. We're going to take the left hand to the right side of the head and just guide the head over towards the left. We're looking for lateral edge length here on the right side of the cervical spine. So you can think about what you can do to maintain as much distance here between the bottom of the ear and kind of the neck shoulder unionization. Really thinking about finding length. And you can even use the right hand to press down and anchor that hip just a little bit more. And then we'll soften back to neutral. Let your palms roll back up, let your eyes close, and give your body a moment to find its equilibrium once again. If we have any amount of dysfunction along the spinal column and we just get some little bit of imbalance in the cerebral fluid flow, it can take a moment to really resettle and refine. Once you do that, you can turn the palm back up. We'll take the right hand straight up and overhead. It'll find its way to the left side of the head and we can guide there. That left palm can turn down. You can even anchor with that. And then we think about creating this left side, cervical spine, lateral edge length. A lot of words to say. We're trying to maximize the distance between the bottom of the ear and that neck shoulder unionization. And we just breathe into that space. And when you feel right, when you feel balanced left to right, we'll bring the head back to neutral, let those palms roll up once again, refine that equilibrium and the stability of the body. Soften those shoulders down away from the ears, and let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. We'll get a little bit of movement out of the way. So wrist, elbow, shoulders stack, fingers splayed out nice and wide. Bring the torso to a neutral place. Think about low back being neutral, but also think about the upper half of the torso being neutral with the shoulder joint. So oftentimes I'll have you drop all the way down. Most of the time when we get into the shape, we're pressed pretty far up. Try to find a neutral integration there. And then from that neutral low back, just curl your toes, lift your seat, and find your way back into the exploration of down dog. Little opportunity to just kick back, find your depth, find that space, pedal out, explore where the restrictiveness is. And then we'll come back down to a balanced hand and knee position. Tabletop, flip the tops of the feet and sink your way back and into child's pose. Settling back into child's pose, thinking about the hips relaxing, utilizing that hip space. And we'll give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here. Try to find a way to interact more with gravity with each breath. So that each breath cycle is like an invitation for gravity to connect with you and feel that gravitational push, gravitational pull, depending on how you want to describe the sensation, compressing the torso even more into the thighs, down towards the floor, towards the mat. And then we'll slide our hands out in front of us if they're not already there. We'll inhale and pull ourselves back forward to hands and knees tabletop, curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. Press into the fingertips, and then take that energy from the fingertips into the finger mounds, and then transition that up the arms and into the shoulders, pushing the hips back into full space. Remembering that you can bend the knees to allow that to be a little bit more easy, and then we'll walk ourselves forward and into fold. In your fold space, let's inhale, find a nice big half lift. Exhale all the way back into fold, settle all the way back into that fold space. Think about just completely easing through that. And then we'll drift our awareness to our sacrum. We're going to roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, stacking the lumbar, stacking the thoracic, stacking the cervical spine, eventually finding our way into this stable mountain pose where we have glute engagement, where we have quad engagement, where we're really rooted through the feet. Refine that neutrality of the cervical spine. Now let's work on a little bit more head rotation. So I'll recenter here. We're going to take our right hand to the small of the back again. Palm's going to be facing away from you. And we'll take our we'll take our, what do we do? Did I do right hand? Give me an L or an R because I don't remember if I'm mirroring or not. How about this? Whichever hand I said first or you did first, let's do that. We'll take the opposite hand and we'll reach it up overhead. And we're going to grab the opposite side of the head once again. Take yourself into that big, long cervical extension. And this time, think really deeply about drawing that elbow and shoulder back. Remember, you want to maintain the anterior neutrality. So as we have this big extension, as we're pulling that shoulder back, we're not allowing the belly to tilt forward. We're keeping the glutes engaged. And then we'll relax, hands come back down to the side, stability and equilibrium, rebalance. And then we'll take this to the second side. So first hand goes behind us. We reach and extend that second hand up. And then we go to the opposite side of the head. We'll pull ourselves into this lateral length. As you pull here, squeeze that shoulder back, maintain that anterior neutrality. Really think about opening up that anterior shoulder capsule. Oh, finding that space. And then eventually we're going to bring our head back to neutral. Let your hands fall to the side. Let's slide the hands behind the legs and just let them slide down the back side of the body as we drift into that little fold. As you drift into the fold, the head eventually lets go. You get that length, the gravitational pull on the cervical spine to create length. And then we'll plant our hands and walk ourselves back into down dog. And this is going to be the last down dog of class. So as we're here, let's just find the space that we have created. Look for that mid back expansion capacity. So as you're pressing down in those handprints and pushing away into the tailbone, think about the middle of that chain for the opportunity of expansion. And then we will come down to hands and knees. And one last time, we'll sink into child's pose. We push all the way back into that child's pose shape. We once again interplay with gravity here. And we'll give ourselves just about 40 seconds here. Just a constant cycle of awareness of our breath, the gravitational force load pressing on the torso itself, of that compression across the front of the hips. Last 10 seconds here. And then when you're ready, hands slide in front of us. If they're not already there, we'll inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we're going to extend those legs straight out in front of us into a little staff pose. Once again, thinking about creating enough hip room that we have nice stability in the shape. And then let's take our blanket or towel and we'll take that to kind of a shelf fold and a hot dog fold. So we end up with a couple inches of blanket thickness. And we'll take our ball and we'll just place that on the top of that. We're going to use both of those together. But before we do that, we'll just take ourselves into a nice standard forward fold. So a forward fold that is supportive of the openness of the posterior chain in the current moment. Don't worry about the flexion of the spinal column. You just go into a shape that feels right for you. The only thing I'll constantly remind you of is if the entirety of the shape is being determined by the hamstring capacity, bend the knees until that's not the case. So we do want to get some of that torso, upper posterior torso expansion. Yeah. And we'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And when you're ready, we're gonna walk ourselves back up into a vertical spine. And then let's take our right knee and bend that. And then let the lateral edge fall out wide. So we end up with a figure four-esque shape with the legs. Right knee pointing towards the edge of the room, left leg extended straight out. We're going to take the ball and the blanket, and you can kind of use the right foot here as a guide. You're going to take that blanket underneath the left leg. The bottom of the right foot kind of provides a stopper for the blanket. And then we're going to take the ball and place that on top of the blanket. So we have blanket underneath the leg, then ball on top of that. And we're going to relax the hamstring until the ball, spear-shaped object, is pressing into kind of the middle point of that hamstring. And as you get that pressure on the back of the hamstring, and that's really what we're looking for here. So we want to release the leg until we feel some sensation. We want to create that sensation. Once you have that sensation, we're going to take ourselves forward and into fold. And the purpose of the ball here is just to change the expansion of the soft tissue in the hamstring. So we're a little more hamstring focused. We've offset the room within the posterior chain by bending the right knee. And then if you imagine that we have, if you took a rubber band in between your two fingers and you pulled it out wide, the middle point of that rubber band, the space kind of at the middle distance between the 2 points, would have the most tension to it. But then if you had somebody else who pinched that rubber band right at the midpoint, well, the pressure then would be shifted to the two midpoints in between each of those 3 points, right? So the pinch in the middle and the fingers on the end. We're doing the same thing with the hamstring here. So generally, when we put that hamstring under load, the middle of the hamstring takes the burden of the expansion. Now we're just moving that to a little bit lower and a little bit higher in the soft tissue itself. When you feel like you've had enough here, let's walk ourselves back up into vertical. We'll take that ball and the blanket and just slide that to the side for the moment. And then you're going to re-extend the left leg and go right back down into the fold. What we're hoping for here is we've opened up a pretty significant amount of space in the posterior chain on the lower side left leg. So hopefully we have some freedom in the hamstring itself. You might even feel this forward fold in like the high calf insertion. Obviously, low back is always in play in forward folds. And we'll give ourselves about 45 more seconds here. Last breath or two, settle into the full depth of the shape, feel that hamstring elongation, and then we'll walk ourselves back up to vertical spine. We're going to switch legs. So the right leg extends, left knee bends, and we'll let that leg fall out wide. You can take your blanket underneath the right hamstring that kind of butts up against the bottom of the left foot, and then the ball is placed right on top of that. And we just settle into the hamstring until you feel the ball pressure. Keeping in mind, this can be a pretty nervy spot, right? We don't often get physical sensation pressing up against that posterior chain here. But as you settle in, be soft enough and then take yourself into the forward fold. And so today's story has a little bit of a complex setup, but there's this man who owns a chocolate factory. And he's owned this chocolate factory for a couple decades. And due to the depreciation, the deterioration of the machinery, his chocolate factory has been consistently becoming less and less productive. And that slowdown in productivity has, of course, impacted his bottom line. The margins of the chocolate industry are not they're not robust, right? You're selling these bars of chocolate for a couple dollars. But through kind of sheer luck, one of his childhood friends, who he's lost contact with, has recently been elected into office. And he is hoping to use that connection to get some government subsidies so that he can redo his factory and return to a much more profitable business. Last 15 seconds here. When you're right, when you're ready, we walk ourselves back to vertical, take that blanket and ball out from underneath the hamstring, release the leg into the openness, and then just depending on that openness or feeling into that openness, we take ourselves forward into this asymmetrical forward fold. And we settle here into all of the room and space we've opened up. Really think about easing your way into that expansiveness. And we'll give ourselves about 15 more seconds here. When you're right, when you're ready, we're going to walk ourselves back up towards a vertical spine. And let's make sure we have super easy access to the ball in the blanket. And we're going to release ourselves onto our back. Little moment of integration here. You settle. The hip work we've done, the hamstring work we've done, the shoulder work we've done, just integrates in as your body greets or is greeted by the neutrality of the mat. We'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds here just to settle into and explore the capacity of the room we've created within our body. When you're right, when you're ready, let's inhale and bring the knees into a bent shape. Kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Obviously, they could have been there already, but if they're not there, we take ourselves into that space. And let's take our ball and we are going to search for the spot that has the most sensation on the right side of the body, just above the hip structure. So into the soft tissue of the low back. And we'll look kind of on the right side of the body from the medial to lateral edge until you find the spot that has the most sensation against the pressure of the ball. And then once you find that, release into the tailbone and just allow that ball pressure, that sphere-shaped pressure, right? It can be a rolled up sock, to just ease into that musculature. And we're just gonna breathe into that for a moment. And just as that kind of constant reminder of why during a shoulder awareness month, we're spending so much time focused around the hip, right? Hamstring just below the hip, kind of that lumbar soft tissue, quadratus laborum will be the most likely space where we find the connection point, the sensational point, just above the hip. Keep in mind that your right shoulder and your left hip are kind of intricately connected through the fascial alignment of the soft tissue. And same thing, right hip and left shoulder have that same interwoven connection. We'll give ourselves just about 10 more seconds here. And when you're ready, let's take that ball out from underneath the right side. We can set that to the side for the moment. Extend the left leg down the mat. Draw the right knee in towards the torso. Compress into that hip nice and firmly. And then release with the left hand. Keep the right hand to keep that compression, and just take the left hand up and overhead. So the fingertips point towards the back of the room, not towards the ceiling. And really try to drive length here between the bottom of the right foot and the top of the left fingertips. So your left leg is extended, the toes are pointed up, but really think about distancing between the bent bottom right foot and that fingertip extension. And then relax your right foot down to the mat. So the right kneecap is bent, left leg stays extended. And we're gonna take the left arm straight up towards the ceiling and then grab the left elbow with the right hand. So the four fingers are on the outside edge and the thumb is on the inside edge in that elbow pit. And then pull the right elbow towards the right side of the room and the left elbow towards the left side of the room. And then as you're pulling in opposite directions, again, with kind of this figure four shape, you're gonna squeeze the left shoulder down into the mat and really think about setting that humeral head deep in the shoulder socket. And then relax the arms out towards cactus. Bend the left knee to mirror the right and let both knees fall over towards the right. Try to keep that left shoulder anchored. We use all that lumbar space we've created. We want the lateral edge of the right hip to be as grounded as it can be. If it doesn't feel grounded, if we didn't open up enough space on that right side, you can take the blanket and slide it underneath that thigh so it's supported. And then we want that left shoulder to be as anchored as it can possibly be as well. Same thing, you could anchor that with a little supportive prop. And we'll give ourselves about 40 more seconds here in the static twist. When you're right, when you're ready, knees return back to neutral. Try to balance the weight distribution. It's likely that that right hip is pretty deeply settled and the left hip doesn't feel quite as settled, but really try to get that back to neutral. And then we're going to reach over and reconnect with our ball, lift ourselves up, slide that ball just above the hip bone structure, and then release down. And then you just search kind of left to right until you find the spot with the most sensation. Once you find the spot with the most sensation, the tailbone relaxes all the way down to the mat. We just have that body weight over the ball prop to create some physical pressure there. Slow, fluid breath cycles really being the key to releasing. And so this chocolate factory owner writes a letter to his friend, right? Fallen out of touch, but didn't fall out of favor as far as he knows. And he expresses kind of the dire financial positions that his chocolate factory is in. Last 15 seconds here. And as you're ready, we take that ball out from underneath the left side, set that to the side once again, extend your right leg down if it's not already, bend that left knee, give yourself the compression component. And then we release the right hand and send that overhead, fingertips facing or pointing towards the wall behind you, not towards the ceiling. And you maximize the distance between the bottom of the left foot on that bent leg and those right fingertips. Really think about creating that bilateral expansion here. Because we have the leg bent, we're able to focus the expansion in the torso itself. And then we release that left foot down. The right fingertips reach up towards the ceiling and the left hand comes to the elbow. Again, thumb kind of on the elbow pit, four fingers on the outer edge of the elbow. And then we push or pull the elbows in opposite directions. So your left elbow is pulling towards the left, your right elbow is pushing towards the right, and then you squeeze the right shoulder back towards the mat. And you can feel how much of the musculature is active in this elbow pressure. And then to retract back, there's just a lot less resistance in the retraction. That's what we're looking for. And we'll relax the arms out towards cactus, bend the right knee to mirror the left, and let both knees fall over towards the left into this static twist. Again, we want the lateral edge of the left thigh to be supported, and we want that right shoulder to be anchored, looking to just relax into the room we've created. And so this new leader of the country receives this letter, sees it's from his old friend, reads about the dire situations, and he writes back and he says, I'm going to send one of my best people to come offer you some guidance. And about a week later, a yogi shows up at the man's factory. And he is not happy. Right? He views this as a slight, as his old friend has just kind of blown him off and has sent someone without any capability of helping. But he also still wants to play the political game, so he engages the yogi and has him shown around. Last 10 seconds here. When you're ready, we're going to bring those knees back to neutral. Kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Let's reach over and reconnect with our sphere-shaped object. And now we are going to take that and place that above the shoulder blade. So here we can be kind of anywhere. We're going to start on the left side. So anywhere from the left of the cervical spine to the right of that shoulder joint itself. So any of this soft tissue here is in play. We just want to capture, again, the spot where we're feeling the most sensation. And then we are going to take the left, so right hand's going to stay in cactus. Left hand's going to tuck underneath the low back. Now, for some of us, that may not be possible. Some of us, this may be so wonderfully sensational that we just can't stay there. If that's the case, you can go back to cactus, right? Cactus has plenty, but when we add the internal rotation, the load of that posterior chain gets pretty darn intense. And we just want to find our way into a slow and exceptionally slow pattern of breath, where the sensation itself starts to dissipate just from the rate of respiration. So start to deepen and elongate the inhale portion of your breath. Start to deepen and elongate the exhale portion of your breath. And notice how just through the duration of the breath itself, we can start to change the way our body is experiencing the sensation of the ball, of the sphere, or sphere-like object. And so the yogi's shown around the factory, and he sees that the machinery itself is all old and used, and the gears are not syncing in the way they should. They're worn down, they're tattered. And after the tour, the owner of the factory is like, okay, well, what can the government do? And the yogi says, let me see your books. Now he wants to look at all the financials. And the factory owner is like more off put by this, right? Like, he did the pony show. He played the game. He wants to move on to where they can get to help. But the yogi insists. He's like, no, let me see the financials here. And so the yogi's kind of put in a room with all the financial experts. move about 45 more seconds here on this first side. And a couple hours later, the yogi emerges and he goes up to the owner of the factory and he says, I see that your energy costs are consistently going up year after year. Do you know why that is? And the factory owner just rolls his eyes and he's like, well, I don't know. Inflation, it's kind of a big deal right now. You may have heard of it. He says, oh, of course, of course. And he goes back into the room. When you're ready, we pull that ball out from underneath the left side and just let your body relax into that space. Left arm returns back to cactus here, and just feel the asymmetrical openness of that shoulder girdle now. So that as your body settles back against the mat, we just appreciate how much room we have on that left side. We're going to do the same thing side two. So ball comes over to the upper shoulder area, right? Trap area. But anywhere between the cervical spine, so just to the right of the spinal column itself and just to the left of the shoulder joint itself, anywhere there that feels right. And once you feel like you've found the spot, we're going to internally rotate that right hand if it's accessible to us and tuck that right hand under the small of the back. Remember, if that's not accessible, we just stay in cactus. And then once we get into our shape, whether it's cactus or whether we have the internal rotation turned on, we just start to slow down our breath once again. As the breath flows, the body relaxes, that musculature relaxes. There's more and more and more space. And so at the end of the day, the yogi connects with the owner of the factory. And he says, I think we can create some dramatic change here. I'm just going to need one night alone in the factory. And I think you'll see incredible improvement. And again, the factory owner, he rolls his eyes, not in front of the yogi, but as he turns away and looks to his staff. And he announces to the staff, the yogi here has decided he's going to bless our factory tonight. So we're going to make sure everything's powered off and give him the night. And then the government can help us in the morning. Last 30 seconds here. When you're right, when you're ready, we can unwind that right arm, release that ball out from underneath us, let both arms fall out towards cactus. Let the knees start to sway side to side. As the knees sway side to side, take a moment just to appreciate the anchoring capacity of the shoulders here, right? So the amount of openness that we've offered across that upper posterior chain shoulder girdle so that you can be fully anchored as the knees start to rock. Give yourself about 30 more seconds of this sway capacity. And then just complete your motion so that you're balanced left to right. And we'll bring our knees back to neutral, kneecaps point towards the ceiling, bottoms of the feet will come together and the knees fall out wide. Little supine butterfly. Appreciate both the hip and shoulder girdle experience here. And so the entirety of the factory clears out. The yogi hears the door lock. During the tour, he was shown where the tools are. He goes, he starts to grab some giant wrenches. He goes into the machinery and he just starts undoing bolts, pulling machinery apart, laying it all out in a very organized fashion. And he starts cleaning the gears, the fittings. And once he's done cleaning the gears and the fittings, he starts oiling the gears and the fittings. When you're right, when you're ready, kneecaps are going to return back to neutral. Push down to the toe mounted heels, lift your belt line up into a little bridge. Release your tailbone back down to the mat. Let your eyes close. Let your awareness drift within you. Ask yourself if there is anything your body might want or need before Shavasana. And if there is, offer that. When you feel right, when you feel ready, just release yourself into a shape where you can fully appreciate Shavasana this morning. And so in the morning, when people start showing up at the factory, the yogi is putting together these newly cleaned, newly oiled pieces of the machinery. And he's bolting everything back up as the owner walks in. The owner looks around and like, what? Why did you? Why? We're going to get all of this replaced. That's why you're here. Yogi says, well, fire up the machines. They fire it up, and sure enough, the factory is producing at a significantly higher rate than it was the day before. And the owner says, what did you do? And so I simply took the friction out of the process. Start to bring some movement to your fingers and your toes, to your wrists and your ankles, elbows, knees, shoulders, hips, neck and head. Eventually, we bring enough movement into our body that we can transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. In a seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid. Eyes closed. Settle into the space. Think about creating that same level of stability, hopefully with a little bit more ease, a little bit less friction than when we started class. Then we'll inhale our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you challenge yourself? In the moments when you are feeling a depletion, a lack of energy, to look back at ways that you can reduce the friction in your life. Friction within the food you eat and digest, the relationships you have, the physicality of the body itself. And see how that replenishes your energy. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of all of you being here. Love the heck out of you. Have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. I'll be back to do this again next week. Love the heck out of you. Mwah.